Hello and welcome to The Rebel's Edge from here at the Nasdaq market site. What could be cooler than the Rebel's Edge from the Nasdaq market site? I'm here with my friend, business partner, Mark Lopresti. Mark, how cool is it to be shooting from right here, Times Square, with all of these cameras and all the lights? This is pretty cool.
That's right. This is, of course, one of the exchanges that makes it all happen. We're so proud to be here, and thanks to all our friends at the Nasdaq for making this possible. The inaugural episode,
Yep.
the first of many, we hope, coming to you from this incredible location.
Yeah, and Mark, we have a sponsor with a deal for folks that want to actually go out and maybe get a free ride on a private jet.
Yeah, well, to make it even more enticing to watch this incredible show, John and I said, what else can we do? Well, let's give some lucky viewer a free ride in a private plane. Everybody wants to do that, right? So our friends and partners at a company called Verijet, that's VERIJET.com, are offering an opportunity to win a ride absolutely free. But you have to go to Verijet's website and put in your worst travel story, your travel nightmare, and that will make you eligible to win. One lucky winner is going to take a ride on one of these incredible Cirrus SF-50 Vision jets. That's the plane that has the parachute, famously, the artificial intelligence landing system that will land the plane by itself if, God forbid, something happens to the pilot. This is open to Rebel's Edge viewers, that Market Rebellion Nation that we love that watches this show 4 times a week. Check it out, Verijet.com. Win a chance. Private jet ride on a Verijet.
Yeah, and you know who has a horrible travel experience?
Pete.
My brother,
yes.
Pete.
Yeah.
Because he didn't make it here this week because of the bad weather that kept him down in Florida.
Yeah.
But we're going to press on, Mark. So let's start with the macro minute, shall we?
Let's do it.
We've got China with a big Q2 miss on GDP, as well as unemployment actually in China up to 21% for people 16 to 24. Neither of those are good news for the global economy or China.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And I think the employment picture in China is really surprising a lot of market watchers, as that's been a segment that the Chinese government has been trying so hard to educate and to instill those values of being part of the workforce. Of course, China being such a huge part of the global economy, this kind of news against the backdrop of the looming or continuing, depending on your opinion, John, recession here in the United States definitely has investors concerned, weighing a bit on markets this morning. Some of the stocks that we're looking at that could be impacted by this, of course, giant Alibaba, right, the Amazon of China, Tencent Holdings, JD.com, but maybe even some of those Chinese EV companies that could also be impacted like this. We're going to be watching this very carefully.
And now, fantastic futures. We always love that.
That's right.
Fantastic futures. Thank you, Jared, for getting that in there. We're going to get you mentioned in there too, Jared. Mark, we initially had a big surge in wheat.
Yeah.
But then it gave it all back. And wheat, on the news that Russia is closing out a grain deal because of how U.S. and other people in the West are treating Russian companies, they said, we're no longer going to let shipments go out of Kiev,
the Black Sea,
and Odessa. We're not going to let that happen anymore.
Right.
So what do you think?
Yeah, well, listen, this is really important because we've been watching, as listeners and viewers of the show will recall, we've been watching how commodity prices have been trading against the backdrop of interest rates, right? Commodity prices tend to enjoy an inverse relationship relative to interest rates. Rates go up, commodity prices go down, and the opposite. We have not seen that happening as consistently as in other market cycles, in part because of geopolitical and global macro things like Russia. So we're going to be continuing to watch in the Fantastic Futures segment as how these commodity prices perform, and of course, so many industries, so many stocks impacted by this commodity volatility.
Absolutely. Well, folks, every day that we do the Rebel's Edge, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we give you our top 4 stocks and our opinions on whether or not we belong those stocks or short them. Here's one that's pretty interesting. Chewy is up pretty good today, Mark. And Chewy is up because Goldman Sachs took them from a neutral to a buy.
That's right.
That's big news And you had another insight that might be even a bigger driver.
Well, I was tempted to say that our first stock is a bit of a dog, but then I decided that I ran potentially afoul of my daughter calling that a dad joke, so I decided not to do that. Listen, we've been watching this company as it has performed. They posted great numbers for the first quarter. Stock trended higher, started to come down. Of course, the other news that you're talking about that we've been following closely is their plan to expand significantly into overseas markets, Europe in particular. Europeans love their pets as much as Americans do, I think, perhaps. We'll see.
That's why they call the French frogs, because they love dogs so much.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. But this is really interesting. Goldman looking for the company to continue generating around 10% growth and steady margin expansion from now through 2027. So that's a pretty long out call from Goldman. So look, I'm a pet lover. I like the stock. I'm feeling pretty bullish on it. I don't always agree with Goldman's analysts, but in this instance, I think I got to go with a bull call on Chewy.
Well, do you like the downgrade over at Figs by Raymond James? Because we just talked about, analysts giveth and they taketh away. This analyst at Ray J is taking away because he said, Figs, these guys make apparel, for instance, folks, for surgeons and anybody who needs a uniform. It's not just Cintas, it's these guys, and they're more comfortable. Quite frankly, I met the CEO of Figs not too long ago, Mark. But this downgrade has shares getting hit pretty good. What do you think of that?
Yeah, trying to unpack the reasoning behind that, one could understand as we continue to emerge, we were still saying this, from the COVID pandemic and the froth coming off the top to the extent that there's any left in any of the stocks that benefited from the types of materials and equipment that first responders and others in healthcare need. Obviously, that would continue to bode negatively for companies like Figs. But this analyst was also talking about the potential impact of the student loan forgiveness not coming into play as expected, that potentially weighing on future revenues.
Maybe they don't upgrade as much.
But maybe they don't
new outfit.
Yeah, right. Maybe the folks in nursing school or medical school are not going to spend that money if they don't have the student loan forgiveness. Very interesting. Going to continue to watch how that one unfolds.
All right. What about this one? ABOS. Boom to the upside. And this one, folks, is in the Alzheimer treatment space. They have an early phase success that is why the stock's up so much. It's unlikely, in my opinion, Mark, that they carry that all the way to phase 3 results. Not because I don't think they can with the drug, but I think if they get past this phase 2 trial,
somebody's going
to take them out.
Yeah, there you
go.
So
I would be, even though it's up big, this would be one I'd hold on to. How about you?
Now listen, I totally agree. This is one of those stocks where we like the story. We think that it's actually got, as you say, a lot of potential. This is seriously big news, folks. There's been a lot of news in the past couple of weeks in Alzheimer's treatments. This is such a critical thing. This is a disease that impacts almost 7 million people a year. It's the 5th leading cause of death in American adults. Really, really terrible. Anybody struggling with a family member that has this terrible cognitive degenerative disease, terrible, terrible thing. And of course, the impact on the economy, massive. 2023 estimate in terms of treatment and care for those with Alzheimer's, almost $350 billion, John. But yeah, I agree with you. If they get anywhere near phase 3, right? I believe this was a phase 1 announcement.
Yes, sir.
So next step is phase 2. If they get through phase 2, I'd look for one of the even bigger biotech pharma companies to take this one out because Alzheimer's is one of those big addressable markets that the majors cannot ignore.
All right. Well, so I think we're in agreement on all the first 3.
I think so.
How about this one? Activision. So ATVI, it's going to close on the 18th of July now that they've basically not had any other impediments. They've gotten by every one of the roadblocks that various regulators have tried to throw at them, Mark. This is the Microsoft takeover of ATVI. Shares are up 3.3% on very strong volume again today. Options are starting to trail off because everybody knows the deal's going to go. And it's going to happen in the next couple days.
Yeah, well, yeah, just about, right?
Yep.
So it's not quite done. The closing date, as John pointed out, for this deal has been the 18th of July for a while now. The 2 biggest impediments to Microsoft acquisition of the incredibly popular Activision Blizzard, right, maker of so many of the games that the gamers absolutely cannot get enough of. enjoying tremendous, tremendous market share are two things, right? One is the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission here in the United States, bringing a case to block the deal on antitrust concerns. And similarly, in the UK, the Competition Appeal Tribunal reviewing the CMA, which is the equivalent of the FTC in the UK, concerns around antitrust in the UK. Hearing going on actually this morning, I believe it ended, being 6 hours ahead. People watching seem to believe that it was heading in the right direction. Microsoft, by the way, announcing, not coincidentally, yesterday on a Sunday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that they're going to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. Very smart lawyers over there saying, what can we do to try to remove the impediments to this deal one by one? I've been bullish on this deal is going to close regardless. One of our friends from B3 reminded me yesterday that the FTC under this administration is 0-4, right? So that actually bodes pretty well for a deal like this getting closed. I think it's going to benefit bulls of both Microsoft and Activision. I don't know if it closes tomorrow, but I think this deal gets done.
Yep, I'm right there with you. So this is another one. So we're 4 for 4 today, folks, as far as our agreement. And who else is 4 for 4? The Nasdaq, not only because we're very grateful that they let us use their fantastic venue here, but also the NDX, Mark. The NDX has basically a 1/100th value of that index as well, because this is a $15,000 index. So the Nasdaq also will be talking more about that and what it means for people that want to trade the Nasdaq stocks through an indice like they have for the S&P 500 with the SPY. They're going to have something similar. They already have the NDX, very popular, but now they'll have one that's priced even more for retail. So I'm very bullish on that. Let's talk about Northwestern.
Oh boy. What
the F is going on over in Evanston, Illinois, folks? Because Northwestern had to cut their head football coach. That's what the president of the university did, despite the fact that they said their internal investigation said he was not aware of various hazing activities of his players. Nonetheless, they fired a friend of mine, Patrick Fitzgerald, the former linebacker and coach who's been wildly successful, except for last year, at Northwestern. And that'll result in a huge lawsuit and probably a settlement with Mr. Fitzgerald. But now they fire the baseball coach, too, for the same thing, hazing. What do you think, Mark? You're a lawyer. I don't know that you've ever had to represent people in things like that.
No.
But, I mean, I don't know that this, if these coaches didn't know, and that's what the internal investigation found, how do you get to fire these guys?
Yeah, listen, this is a hard one for me to even understand how this kind of thing can continue to go on, right, in this type of an environment where bullying and hazing activity has been so aggressively fought against, thank God. And how these universities aren't concerned about liability. Because this is the kind of thing that you could be looking at massive, massive multi-million or tens of millions of dollar settlements. And if you think the parents of these kids that were impacted by this aren't lawyering up if they haven't already, then I've got a bridge not too far from here that I'd like to sell you. So very disappointing to see this kind of thing continue. But here's one thing I do like, the silver lining, is the level of commitment and the level of knowledge that's imputed to these coaches. Whether or not you knew what was going on, yet you have to know what's going on in your locker rooms, right? And even if this kind of thing happened and you didn't know about it, you're still going to be, axed, you're going to be cut, and your career is going to be damaged. And I think that's the standard that should be applied in college athletics and professional athletics too. But
as you guys that have been watching Rebels Edge in the past have heard from my brother Pete, not only was he one of the people that stood up for Lou Holtz against hazing at the University of Minnesota when both my brother and Lou Holtz were there, but also he said, you've got to have people in the locker rooms. The coach can't just go to his office and shut the door, and most don't. Mostly they have assistant coaches and things like that that just kind of hang around to make sure that people aren't doing things they shouldn't do in the locker room.
Taking performance enhancing, right? I mean, I remember the stories, and I won't say who I heard these from, about the candy bowls, right, of different things that would sort of take a handful on the way to the field. Crazy. I mean, that's in a pro sports
but it did
setting.
happen.
But it did happen, right? So hard to believe that just nobody's watching the store in these situations.
Well, and last one, Women's World Cup.
Yeah.
Are they capable of back-to-back wins? This is one of the best teams, the U.S. women's team that's ever been on the soccer field, and that's what we're talking about here. Back-to-back World Cups, Mark?
Yeah, well, we got to see what we're doing tonight at around 9 o'clock Eastern time, because we're going to be here in New York for a couple of days, folks. We'll be shooting the Edge again here tomorrow from the incredible Nasdaq studios at the Nasdaq market site here in Times Square. But at 9 p.m., the women's team takes on Vietnam. We're going to be looking for a good pub to watch that in, I'm sure, and then maybe we'll report back to folks tomorrow about how that turned out. But, of course, go Team USA and the incredible, unstoppable popularity of soccer in this country. This is part, and you know when it comes to sports, I always like to give the business angle of it. This is a business show at the end of the day. But a friend of ours, I won't mention his name just to not cause him any embarrassment, that owns an MLS soccer team here in this country, was telling me that the price for an MLS franchise went in the course of about 5 or 6 years from $50 million to $150 million to $250 million to I think somewhere around $400 million just for the right to start and be part of Major League Soccer here in the United States. That is such an incredible business. And of course, the addressable market for soccer is arguably the sport that is globally ubiquitous.
Yep.
Right? So it's really, from the business perspective, fascinating to watch.
Mark Lopresti, thank you so much, sir.
Jon Najarian, always a pleasure, sir.
Make sure, folks, that you tune in also to our B3 or Bulls, Bears, and Blockchain Sundays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, 5:30 Eastern Time. And, of course, as Mark said, go to Verijet, sponsor of the show today, VERIJET. Give them your worst travel experience, and you qualify for a free ride on a private jet, just like we do.
Okay.
All right. Have a good one, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Time.